She was a stay-at-home mom with no publishing experience, no industry contacts, and no grand ambitions of becoming a writer. By all accounts, she lived a quiet suburban life. Church on Sundays, endless carpools, and tucking her kids into bed with storybooks she hadn't written herself. No one, least of all Stephenie, imagined she would become the most talked-about author of her generation. But then came the dream. A literal dream that Stephenie Meyer herself experienced one night. A girl in a meadow, her heart hammering as a vampire with glittering skin, confessed that he wanted her blood almost as much as he wanted her love. Should he kiss her or kill her? That single image burned into Meyer's mind, and it would change the course of her life forever. From that one dream grew a story so polarizing it split the world in two. Within 5 years, Stephenie Meyer's Twilight saga had sold over 160 million copies, spawned a multi-billion-dollar film franchise, and turned a sleepy logging town in Washington into the epicenter of global teen obsession.
I recently just went to Forks, Washington, so let me walk you through everything you need to do to have the most perfect Twilight getaway. The town of Forks is very, very small, and as soon as you get into the city, you are welcomed with this lovely, Forks welcome sign.
But with the worship came ridicule. For every fan who wore a Team Edward t-shirt to midnight book releases, there was a critic ready to call her prose juvenile, her moral suspect, and her success undeserved. The world crowned her queen of YA fantasy, and then tried to burn her throne.
So firstly, I think that Twilight's trash. I don't think Stephenie Meyer's a good writer, and I think to try to chastise and humble authors who think that they are better than Stephenie Meyer, is very unserious behavior.
Was people being shocked that I gave Twilight 1 star? Let me break it down. And I always lead from Twilight is racist. It is the appropriation of Native lore, and then it goes on to misrepresent those Native characters in its book. Under that, it is full of misogyny, and it is purity culture propaganda.
And here's the real question. What happens when your fantasy outgrows you? When Hollywood, the hunger of millions, and the harshest voices in publishing collide with the private life of a woman who never asked to be famous? Her rise, the controversies that shadowed her, the personal cost of her success, and the secrets of what might still lie ahead. The untold story of Stephenie Meyer, rise, fall, and return. Before that dream would upend her life, who was Stephenie Meyer? Stephenie Morgan Meyer was born on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1973, in Hartford, Connecticut. She was the second of 6 children in a bustling household. When she was just 4 years old, her parents packed up their young family and moved across the country to Phoenix, Arizona, a land of scorching sun, far away from the fog that would one day define her most famous setting. Her father worked as a financial officer, and her mother, Candy, managed their busy home. They raised their children in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For Stephenie, her Mormon faith was simply the fabric of daily life. But years later, critics would argue that its fingerprints were all over her stories. She was shy, quiet, a self-professed bookworm. While other kids were at football games, Stephenie was curled up with Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte, falling in love with stories of stubborn heroines and brooding men. She later admitted that Elizabeth Bennet and Edward Rochester shaped her idea of romance long before Edward Cullen ever existed. At Chaparral High School, she excelled academically and won a National Merit Scholarship, which carried her to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. There, she majored in English literature, graduating in 1997. But even then, she never imagined writing her own novel. She saw herself as a reader, not a creator. At 21, Stephenie married her childhood friend, Christian Pancho Meyer. By her mid-20s, she was a stay-at-home mom raising 3 boys.
You had 3 young kids,
Yes.
a very full life, a husband,
Yes.
and you're writing a book on the side?
So while I'm making breakfast for the kids and for my husband and getting them off, I was thinking about what's going to happen and what are they going to say now?
It just started
It was coming
in,
so fast.
flooding in.
The problem was not being able to type fast enough. And when every time the kids needed something, I was pretty bad. I'd be like, I have to get up and get him an apple.
Her daily life revolved around family, church, and keeping up with the chaos of 3 young children. Writing wasn't on her radar exactly. Not until that extraordinary dream in 2003 would shake up everything.
Well, I got the idea for Twilight from a dream. It was a great dream. I woke up from it and just sat there thinking about these characters. It was the Meadow scene in the novel is basically the dream that I had, and so I sat down. I was afraid of forgetting the dream because it was so good. I sat down to write it out, and so that first day I wrote 10 pages and pretty much all of chapter 13.
So how did a quiet, bookish mom in Phoenix make the leap from bedtime stories to global phenomenon?
Can we please turn the host into a BookTok book? Because this is my favorite book of all time.
Has anybody else read this book? Anybody? Did anybody else read this book? I need to know.
This woman had the audacity to write the same book 3 times, and we all bought it. Genius.
It all began on June 2nd, 2003, with a literal midnight dream she had one night. Stephenie woke from a vision so vivid it refused to let go. In this dream she couldn't shake, a teenage girl sat in a meadow speaking to a vampire who shimmered like diamonds in the sunlight. He confessed he was both hopelessly in love with her and dangerously tempted to end her life. The electric mix of romance and peril lodged itself in her brain. She later labeled the scene simply, Chapter 13. That morning, she sat down at her computer, not to write a book, but to capture the dream before it vanished. She didn't outline or plan, she just typed to see what would happen next. Over the course of 3 months, often late at night after her kids were asleep, she poured out more than 500 pages. She later admitted she would sometimes write until 2 or 3 in the morning, driven not by ambition, but by obsession. This was the beginning of her transformation from reader to writer. For the first time, she saw herself not just consuming stories, but creating them. When she finally finished the manuscript, Stephenie wasn't sure what to do with it. She printed it out, shared it nervously with a few family members, and then tucked it away. She doubted anyone else would care. In interviews, she later confessed, "I never really planned to be a writer. I was just writing down a story for myself because I couldn't get it out of my head."
And so I never sat down to write a novel. It was just a chance to kind of play with the characters in my head. And when I finished it, no one was more shocked than me that I'd actually finished a book.
But her sister Emily had other plans. Convinced the story was special, she urged Stephenie to start reaching out to literary agents for representation.
My big sister was picking me to saying I had to do it. She was the only one who'd read anything Twilight.
Stephenie laughed it off. What were the odds that anyone would care about the fantasy scribbles of a suburban mother? But still, could she be surprised? So she sent out 15 letters. Most went unanswered. 9 came back as rejections. Discouraged, she nearly gave up, wondering if the stack of pages on her desk would forever remain nothing more than a private fantasy, destined to gather dust rather than ever find an audience. Then came one fateful response from Jody Reamer of Writer's House. Reamer asked to see the full manuscript. Days later, she called Stephenie with an offer of representation. Within weeks, Reamer set off a bidding war. 8 publishers competed. The winner, Little, Brown and Company, shocked the industry with a $750,000 offer for 3 books. For a completely unknown writer, it was nearly unheard of. Stephenie was stunned. She once explained that admitting she was writing a novel felt like confessing a secret ambition to be a rock star. It's something outrageous, a little embarrassing, and completely unrealistic. And yet, in just months, her private dream had become publishing's hottest property. In 2005, Twilight hit shelves. Its cover, an outstretched hand offering a forbidden apple, was instantly iconic. The initial print run of 75,000 copies sold out quickly. The book shot up the New York Times bestseller list, where it stayed for months.
Hello? Because I just finished Eclipse. I posted a read with me. You should go check that out. 3rd book of the Twilight series. A lot happened in this book.
By year's end, teenagers everywhere were whispering Edward Cullen's name. Twilight was only the beginning. The sequels followed in rapid succession as Stephenie threw herself into the process of expanding Bella and Edward's world. She has described how she drafted scenes quickly, often immersing herself so fully that everyday life blurred into the background. The result was New Moon in 2006, Eclipse in 2007, and Breaking Dawn in 2008. Together they became the Twilight Saga, a series that would ultimately sell over 160 million copies in 37 languages worldwide.
That's what I'm reading for the first time. This shit right here, and it is... This was so good. Okay, I'm sorry for any hate I've ever given Twilight. This shit was fire.
The cultural explosion was staggering. By 2008, Meyer had sold 29 million books in a single year, making her the best-selling author in the United States. In 2009, she sold another 26.5 million. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world, and Forbes ranked her among the highest-earning authors, with annual earnings surpassing $50 million. The impact went far beyond sales. Teenagers declared allegiance to Team Edward, or Team Jacob, sparking debates in school cafeterias and online forums.
Edward was the best choice for Bella. Jacob was the best choice for any other human being ever to exist ever. I feel like the people who hate Jacob have only ever seen the movies. You have not experienced the book. You don't know what you're talking about.
I prefer Jacob over Edward. Mind you, I do love Edward and I love Robert Pattinson, but I think Jacob would have been better for Bella in the long run. Now, I do think Bella, at least in the movies, looks better with Edward, and I don't think Edward was a terrible guy. I just think that thinking about her life and all that, she would have had a much better life had she been with Jacob.
Midnight release parties drew thousands to bookstores dressed as vampires and werewolves. Forks, Washington, the rainy logging town she had picked almost at random, suddenly became a tourist pilgrimage site, with annual visitors jumping from just a few thousand before Twilight to more than 70,000 at the height of the craze.
You are welcomed with this lovely Forks welcome sign. A lot of things to do near this little spot. In this area, you will find Bella's truck, both from the book and from the film. Twilight has a lot of cool merch and just funny merch that any Twilight lover will be obsessed with.
Hollywood couldn't resist. In 2007, Summit Entertainment secured the rights, and Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were cast as Bella and Edward. The first film premiered in 2008 and grossed $407 million worldwide. The phenomenon only escalated. 5 films later, the saga had grossed more than $3.34 billion globally. Red carpets overflowed with screaming fans, and the actors were catapulted into international stardom. Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart suddenly found their private lives under relentless scrutiny, with paparazzi following their every move and tabloids speculating about their off-screen romance. Both spoke later about the overwhelming pressure of fame at such a young age, describing the whirlwind as surreal, isolating, and at times almost unmanageable. For Stephenie, it was surreal. She had gone from scribbling in the quiet of her Arizona home to standing on movie sets, her characters brought to life in front of cameras. She later admitted she never felt fully at ease in the Hollywood machine, but she couldn't deny the thrill of seeing her dream explode into reality. The media crowned her a cultural juggernaut. Entertainment Weekly called her one of the most powerful women in entertainment. Fans called her a hero. Even skeptics admitted, love it or hate it, Twilight was impossible to ignore.
Y'all, so far, this book is so good. And it is so good. I've already had to pace my apartment once because I was floored with a plot twist already that I did not see coming at all.
But with great fame comes fierce backlash. By 2009, as Twilight was at its cultural peak, the criticism had grown just as loud as the praise. Reviewers accused Meyer's writing of being simplistic, repetitive, even clumsy. Some educators argued that Bella Swan was a poor role model, too passive, too defined by her relationship with Edward. Feminist critics worried the story romanticized unhealthy dynamics, obsession, control, even emotional manipulation. Stephen King himself weighed in, telling USA Today, "Stephenie Meyer can't write worth a darn. She's not very good." It was a blunt, headline-making dismissal that cut through the noise. King never retracted or softened that comment in later interviews, and it remains one of the most quoted critiques of Meyer's work. Others accused Meyer of promoting abstinence-only ideals through her Mormon background, pointing to Bella and Edward's chaste relationship and the series' focus on marriage and motherhood. Debates erupted across the internet. Was Meyer embedding conservative values into a supposedly modern romance? Or was she simply telling the story that made sense to her characters?
There's so much more to say about the racism in Twilight. As I mentioned in this video, out of the text, there is the whole issue of appropriation, but in the text, we've got loads and loads of misrepresentations and microaggressions and straight out aggressions. All of the wolves belong to the Quileute tribe. They are often portrayed as inferior to the pale class of vampires, more violent and aggressive, impoverished, savage, described as stinky and smelly, and repeatedly called dogs.
The backlash wasn't just academic. Online memes mocked the sparkling vampires as childish, comparing Edward Cullen unfavorably to darker, grittier monsters in pop culture. Still a better love story than Twilight became a running internet joke that spread like wildfire. For Meyer, the criticism was overwhelming. She admitted she rarely read reviews, but she couldn't entirely escape the noise. In interviews, she confessed that the negativity stung, that it was bewildering to see something so personal turned into a cultural punching bag. She described feeling exposed and misunderstood, torn between gratitude for her readers and a desire to retreat from the spotlight. Fame had turned her into a lightning rod, and the very dream that made her a global celebrity had also made her a target. After the storm of Twilight, what came next for Stephenie Meyer? Thankfully, she didn't run away. In 2008, right in the middle of Twilight mania, Meyer released The Host, a science fiction novel for adults.
Book, The Host. I love it so much. Now I want to reread it again, just holding it. The book is amazing. The movie did it justice. If you haven't read this book, you need to go back and read it because it is so freaking good.
This book, The Host by Stephenie Meyer. Does anybody else think of this book every now and then and wish that it had a sequel? Wonder why it doesn't have a sequel? It was set up to have one.
Why did nobody tell me? Nobody warned me. Nobody told me that this book was gonna rip my heart out and hand it to me. I opened the book because I just didn't know if I was ready to deal with things yet, but never have I been up in the middle of the night shedding real tears over a book.
The story followed an alien species that takes over human bodies, and one girl who fights back. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and sold over 1 million copies in its first year. Though it never reached the stratospheric heights of Twilight, it proved Meyer wasn't a one-trick pony. In 2013, The Host was adapted into a film starring Saoirse Ronan, Max Irons, and Jake Abel. Unlike Twilight, however, the movie flopped, earning just $63 million against a $40 million budget. Critics were lukewarm, and audiences failed to connect. It was a stark reminder that lightning rarely strikes twice. Meyer also experimented with other projects. She wrote The Short Second Life of Brie Tanner in 2010, a novella expanding the world of Twilight. Fans responded with enthusiasm. The book sold over 1 million copies in its first year and was even given away for free online to support charity, a move that endeared Meyer to many of her readers. Critics viewed it as a smart expansion of the universe, and for longtime fans it offered a fresh perspective on the events of Eclipse. She surprised fans with Life and Death in 2015, a gender-swapped retelling of the original novel for its 10th anniversary. And she co-produced several film projects, including the 2013 adaptation of Shannon Hale's Austenland. But after the frenzy, Meyer admitted she struggled with burnout. The public backlash had taken its toll, and the weight of expectation felt crushing. In a 2013 interview, she confessed she was so over Twilight and had no desire to return to that world anytime soon. For years, she kept a lower profile, focusing on her family and occasionally dabbling in production through her company, Fickle Fish Films, a name she has explained as a playful nod to her love of quirky imagery, inspired by the idea that even the smallest, most unlikely creature can swim against the current and make an impact. Yet, even when she tried to step back, the shadow of Twilight loomed large. Fans continued to beg for more. Every interview, every public appearance, the question followed her. Would she ever return to Edward and Bella? For years, fans held out hope that Meyer would finish the one project that had become almost myth, Midnight Sun. The book was a retelling of Twilight through Edward Cullen's perspective. Stephenie began drafting it in 2008, But when a partial manuscript leaked online, she was devastated. Feeling betrayed, she shelved the project indefinitely, telling fans she couldn't continue while the experience still felt so raw. But she never abandoned it completely. In interviews, she admitted she would revisit the draft from time to time, tweaking scenes but never quite ready to publish. Fans, however, never forgot. For over a decade, they campaigned relentlessly. Letters, petitions, social media pleas, all begging her to finish Edward's side of the story. Then came 2020. In the middle of the global pandemic, Meyer finally announced she would publish Midnight Sun. The reaction was electric. Social media lit up with nostalgic posts from longtime readers who described crying as they held the book in their hands after so many years of waiting. Bookstores reported lines of masked fans on release day despite pandemic restrictions, and online communities buzzed with excitement, fan art, and renewed debates about Team Edward versus Team Jacob. She later explained that she wanted to give her readers something comforting during a difficult year, describing the release as both a gift and a relief.
I am very excited to finally announce the release of Midnight Sun on August 4th. It's a crazy time right now, and I wasn't sure if it was the right time to put this book out, but some of you have been waiting for just so long. It didn't seem fair to make you wait anymore. Sorry about the bad timing. Hopefully this book can be a fun distraction from the real world. And I'm so excited to finally be able to share it with you. Thank you.
When the book hit shelves in August 2020, it sold more than 1 million copies in its first week in the US alone, debuting at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. For many fans, it was like returning to a familiar home. Same characters, same world, but through an entirely new lens. Critics were mixed, but the numbers didn't lie. Meyer could still move books by the millions. She proved that her story and her fandom still had staying power after nearly 2 decades. So where is Stephenie Meyer now, and what lies ahead? Today, she continues to balance writing with running her production company, Fickle Fish Films, which develops book adaptations for film and television. She has co-produced projects like Austenland and The Host, and remains quietly involved in Hollywood behind the scenes. Meyer has hinted at wanting to write more outside the Twilight universe. Thrillers, new adult fiction, and possibly even another science fiction series. In a 2020 interview, she confessed she has at least 2 non-Twilight books drafted and waiting, though she hasn't committed to publishing dates. Still, the gravitational pull of Twilight remains strong. She has acknowledged she could return to that world again, perhaps through additional retellings or exploring the next generation of characters. But she has also been candid that the emotional toll of reliving Bella and Edward's saga makes it difficult to keep returning. As of today, Stephenie Meyer still lives in Arizona with her husband Pancho and their 3 sons. She continues to be protective of her private life, rarely appearing at public events and carefully guarding her family's privacy. Fame, after all, was never what she chased. It was what found her. The question of what's next remains open. Another novel? A return to film producing? Or perhaps something entirely unexpected? If her past has taught us anything, it's that Stephenie Meyer has a way of surprising both fans and critics alike. Stephenie Meyer's story is a paradox. A woman who never meant to write a novel ended up reshaping an entire generation's reading habits. A quiet mom from Phoenix sparked global debates about love, gender, morality, and literature itself. Her words alone triggered midnight bookstore lines, pilgrimages to Forks, Washington, and billion-dollar box office runs. That kind of magic, born not from marketing schemes, but from the raw pull of a story that began while she was sleeping, reminds us how rare and transformative it is when a writer taps into themselves and their own quiet callings so purely and naturally. And maybe that is Stephenie Meyer's greatest legacy, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary lives. If this untold story kept you hooked, smash that subscribe button like it's a forbidden apple, because you never know which twisty, page-turning author we'll dive into next. And while you're here, sink your fangs into our wild, twist-packed, drama-drenched story on Sarah J. Maas. It's every bit as spellbinding, and you definitely don't want to miss that bite.